Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are located right now. Today, I would like to share with you how people are mapped based on our culture background that will be useful for our visual ethnography activities during the summer camp of 2022, as well as our multicultural working environment. Techniques that made us successful with a group of people from one country may not work with another group from a different country. To be collaborative, we need to embrace cultural diversity and open ourselves to learn different communication approaches and making adjustments along the way. We need to learn and relearn new strategies to communicate effectively with different groups of people. During this visual ethnography summer camp, we are going to interact every day for 2 weeks with friends from different culture background. In this video, I would like to point on skills that we are going to use or experience in daily activities, especially in communication. We are going to start with communication. As we are working or build a networking with people around, very little chance that we are only working with the same nationality. Especially today's generation and era, we work with different nationality in everyday life. For example, we could lead a meeting from Germany or Japan with Indonesian audience where they are born and raised and live in Indonesia. Of course, we can get it done through the internet, communicating back and forth and try to win a deal and get the yes words. But we may face some difficulties in communicating. In the globalization, people are traveling a lot more. For younger generation, prefer to do semester abroad through exchange program, either short or long period of program. For example, what we are doing right now, we are having a visual ethnography program where the participants are from Germany, Japan, and Indonesia. So the reason people choose to study or doing activities outside of their college is widening his or her horizons and also getting some experiences, friends, or networking. Having experiences of other countries will also adding value in resume perhaps, or even for self-improvement. It will enrich themselves when working with people from other nationality. Knowing other culture is important before interact with foreigner, and we can be aware of doing or acting without offending others. My question now. Have you ever having conversation where you were talking, asking your friend, whether asking their opinions or anything, and seems your friends doesn't grasp or what you were asking, they don't understand. Not even asking twice, but you didn't get any reply at all. I'm sure it happens to each of us. It is called a miscommunication. It leads to confusion, frustration, and even animosity, and we start putting our perception tend to negativity. So if you see the pictures where one person is trying to extending his hand for handshaking, but the other person is trying to respect the other culture by bowing down. So it could lead a frustration because we don't see the same, or we don't feel, we don't think we are in the same pace. So this may cause a miscommunication. So why do we have different way of communicating? Based on our communication culture, people are divided into two communicating language clusters based on how long of history and level of homogeneity impact the communication style. Example, if you see the picture, you see a newlyweds and the couples who have been living together for a long time. So newlyweds on the picture, it's hard to communicate. Why? because two different personalities just trying to get adapted to each other. However, if you see in another picture, people who lived together for a long time, they shared many things together, so they do understand of each other, and they might not need to express a lot of words, but it could be just an eye winked, they would understand each other. Having shared context. Thinking about when we are travel abroad. When we are travel abroad, especially to Western countries, we have to follow signs to get to our destination, right? The signs are clear and easy to be followed. However, if you come to Indonesia, or especially when you come to Bali, you will be so amazed if you find clear signs or direction, because we are not taught to read signs, not taught to read a map. We have been taught since early childhood to ask around and never be shy to ask around. Otherwise, we will get so lost. So, in this context, interpersonal communication is highly needed. And especially if you see both of the pictures, when people are asking around and the other is just trying to follow the map, it also shows how the collectivism culture versus the individualism culture. So collectivism cultures versus individualisms shown here, because in a country where people are more collective, they feel safer when asking people around. In another hand, in a country where people tend to be individualism, they have to use their ability to find out on something, because bothering others is annoying. So some people thinking that if I nagging or asking a lot of people, they will feel their time is wasted and it could annoying people. So those two examples give us clear understanding how people are different in communication way. There are two types of context culture in communication. Those are, one is low context culture and two is high context culture. Now, on the other side, what is low context culture? Low context tend to be more rational, more finding the end of result, such as numbers, facts, dates. So the story here is not important. Low context culture, good communication in low context culture is precise, simple and clear. Messages are expressed and understood at a face value, where repetition is highly needed and it helps to clarify the communication. So in low context culture, when it is formed, where a country is shaped by enormous of immigrants from various countries, where they share different histories, different languages, and different background, and cause them to share a little context. Due to many people are coming to a country who have different background, ethnicity, and also language, it causes adaptation to the situation is required to be fast. Not only adapt to the way a new environment, new social life, and new working lifestyle is highly needed, since people need communication as a tool to understand each other, it requires fast learning. Must be concise, explicit to minimize the ambiguity as well as misunderstanding. People must keep in their mind things that they would like to communicate. And there is a word or a shorten, it's a lot of people say KISS, KISS. So what is KISS? In communication, we keep saying is KISS is keep it simple and straightforward. It requires attention to the literal meaning of words than to the context surroundings. To minimize the misunderstanding, sending and receiving accurate message and enable people to comprehend, perhaps some of them have very little language ability. The signs for direction is very clear and followable. Doing repetition to provide the necessary clarity and making sure persons who receive message know what steps they will take. For example, when you are having a wedding party, you will invite your friends with a card, right? Mention the date, where's the place, and what time is going to be. And you are asking people to make a reservation in order to confirm whether you are going to be in the wedding party or not, or are you coming or not. So the good point of the reservation, or in this case, is the repetition. I consider reservation is repeat. Repetition is good for the brides and groom or even the family member, because they can arrange the wedding better. They can arrange the wedding more details, how many people will arrive in the wedding, how much food that they will have to provide for the wedding invitees. So here also it shows, because everything takes faster, people are not focused much on interpersonal relationship, because must be focused on following standards and procedures that may lead to a short-term relationship. And in the low context culture, flexibility is very limited. Plan sometimes change. It's considered abnormal, and sometimes it's not tolerable, because everything is just stick with the time being. So, in the other hand, what is high context culture? Based on high context culture, good communication is powerful and layered. Messages are both spoken and read between the lines. Messages are often implied but not plainly expressed. I give you example where high context culture tend to have a long shared history. Usually they are relationship oriented societies where networks of connections are passed on from generation to generation and generally shared context among community members. So in the high context culture, it's not something unusual if we know the grandparents of someone, and then from the grandparents, the friendship is passing through to the son or daughter, and then the friendship is passing through again to the kids, and it's continue like that. So everybody knows everybody. In the high context culture, focus on long-term relationships to derive meaning, which makes explicitness unnecessary. Communication is more indirect, implicit, subtle, layered, and nuanced. As for Balinese, when you are visiting your friend's house, they will offer you food to eat. Even in reality, they didn't even have anything cooked yet. So small talks are very important to start conversation, and it shows your generosity to others. Because being generous is one thing that we in high context society value. The third one is nonverbal cues. So like tone of voice, eye movement, gestures, and facial expressions are having great meaning in communicating. Signs are not well seen because people tend to prioritize asking others to get it right direction. As I mentioned earlier, how the collectivism people and individualism people, they value collectivism and individualism. So true intent of the message is not communicated verbally and is often left to the interpretation of the individual, which requires contextual understanding and reading between the lines. In other words, verbal message is indirect, often talking around the point, and requires shared culture context to carry meaning. For example, in the low context culture, you invite people to your wedding. So earlier, I was mentioned about how the low context culture giving the invitation. So now, how high context culture giving the invitation as well. So when people are invited to a wedding, they are not using the written invitation. I mean, not always, yeah. So most of them are using the written invitation, but in the high context, the interpersonal communication is highly demanded. So written or card invitation sometimes could be the second option. So brides or groom or parents will inform their closest one to attend wedding by passing oral invitation. For example, I will have a wedding. Because we are very close, I do not need to send an invitation because sending invitation might offend somebody. Yeah. Why? Because they feel that why am I invited with the card? Yeah. Where we are, one person to another person having a very close relation. So the inviter will just say when the date, time, and place of the wedding will be held. And the invitees will be putting in their calendar and they try to remember. So that is how the difference between low context and high context culture. In high context culture, people tend to be nice to others by asking personal questions. So when we are going to visit places in Indonesia, either in Bali or Yogyakarta, we might bump into a person, a seller on the street, or people that we talk among our group, and they might need to know where are you from? What are you doing here? Do you have any children? This is your first time to come to Indonesia, and what is your opinion? So low context culture need to be ready when people ask personal question without any offensive feeling. Yeah, so don't feel that, ooh, why do they questioning me? Why am I asking that many questions? So don't feel like that, because people in high context culture, they're just trying to be nice. They would like to know you better in order to engage the interpersonal communication. Yeah. So in the low context culture, we talk also about flexibility. But in high context culture, flexible is highly adjusted because people always try to be positive if something come up last minute. As it was explained before, that the characteristic of low context are literary, explicit, simple, concise, and clear, and everything must be repeated to avoid mistakes. And when we are working with multinational culture, summary of meeting is not enough just to be read, but written summary is a must to be shared to the meeting members. It will very beneficial when we are working in a company where multinational employees are there, interact with each other. So where the high context culture, the characteristic are all the message sometimes have different meaning based on how the receiver's understanding. Therefore, it is called layered. It takes more words to get to the point. Because it is layered, the receiver must have good listening and understanding to convey the message right. Due to interpersonal relationship, therefore people tend to have more feeling involved. Sometimes it could lead to hard feeling because it might not be understood well enough by the receiver. Or it also could be the sender was using layered way of communication and the receiver was not paying fully attention. So during interaction with low context culture, All culture background must understand that behavior norms are communicated by putting in writing rather than personal enforcement. It was not only verbal information or verbal warning, but it is realized into a written information or warning. When we did something good or bad during our task progress or completion, being called to the office and being corrected is considered rude. Everyone follows strictly the signs and will feel lost when they don't see any signs. And in the working environment, day off is mean day off. It is his or her rights not to do any work related since the day off mainly for personal time. So a lot of people, when they say, hey, I am going somewhere, so please don't give me any work. Yeah, because day off means day off. Because low context culture is mainly written communication, therefore, before someone signs anything, a person must understand completely what he or she is signing, or in other words, avoiding gray area. Legal system is the highest and no compromise. So we need to read all the blueprints in order for us to understand. Definitely, yes means yes. When someone say yes, it is an integrity and it is a commitment to finish the task. So as you see from the slides, you see the different side of countries who are considered as a low context culture and countries who are in the middle, where they could be tend to high context culture or low context culture. And on the other side, you see the countries that are mainly value, or the way they communicate is considered high context culture. How do we work or interact with people from high context culture? So earlier we talked about how we work with low context culture, and now how we work with people from high context culture. So since there is not many signs to follow, yeah, and this has happened a lot in Bali, when you will see during your travel in Bali, there is a lot of ceremony being held, and you will out of the blue there will be a route will be rerouted, and we have to go along with the changed road direction. So sometimes they will close the road and we will reroute it to another direction through the communities, small roads which we never expected to be in that kind of road. So instead of being lost, everyone must be able to ask around, or must have consciousness on surrounding, because we don't see, hardly ever seen a sign in a community's road. So in the Eastern culture, especially in the working environment, when we are working in the company, being called to the office and being corrected is a normal procedure, especially in Indonesia. It is advisable to discuss any kind of matters privately, especially if the matters can harm one's dignity. So causing shame and humiliation to anyone is not acceptable. An act of helping one avoid getting humiliated is judged as kind and very well-mannered action. So people do not like to be exposed in the public. Yeah, so if we are in the working environment, we do something wrong and we expect somebody to correct us, and is not going to be corrected in front of other people, but the high context culture will prefer to be set aside and talk privately. So in high context culture, sometimes talking about working days, day off could mean working, people is demanded to have their job done as priority, and it is one of the responsibility and loyalty. So even though you give your leave of absence to your superior, to your boss, and then you said, hey, I am going for vacation for a week, and then sometimes our friends will call, hey, can you give me some update on this? So it doesn't mean that we are completely off. We are just still working, but it's not in the office. So that is consider working in the high context culture. In every important documents, people are obliged to read the details, but most of the time is ignored. So reminder is important. We have to keep reminding because sometimes people are just switch tasking from one thing to another, and they tend to forget about things, and so we have to remind them. As high context, our put relationship is the highest, therefore pre-existing trust through interpersonal relationship is a preference. Yeah. So when we have, for example, when we are talking about working and we have friends coming or work-related partners coming, yeah, we usually do more kind of like fun activities, yeah, instead of talking about work, yeah, because we would like to build the interpersonal communication in order to have the partnership better. So the last regulating behavior is yes could be mean yes, no, or maybe. So why? Because in Indonesia, everyone, I should not say in Indonesia specifically, but in the high context culture, everyone always try not to hurt anybody's feeling when they act or talk. So therefore, sometimes people become so polite, and it's hard to know what they are really meant. So people trying to avoid saying no directly for fear to sound disrespectful. That's why most will say yes, but. Yeah, so probably you will, yes, I think, and it's already means as clear as no or agree or maybe. So therefore, when we convey the message, the sender must making sure that the receiver is understand completely. During the summer camp, we will interact with people. We will go to many places and interact with communities either in Bali or in Yogyakarta. So there are some things that we have to keep in mind. The first thing in communication also, how do we address people? In low context culture, people are often referred mostly by their first name, and it is not uncommon to address those older than you by first name. However, in high context culture, people are often addressed appropriately with Mr., Mrs., Miss, or in Indonesia, we call a male version is Bapak. For female, we will call Ibu. For people who are older or the same age as us, either male or female, we call Kakak. And we call Ade for younger age. So addressing people with those Bapak, Ibu, Kakak, Ade, or other things, it is a sign of respect to others. When you walk around to buy something, people often call you Kakak, even though you are seems younger. It seems offensive if we call someone by using their first name, unless you are older than known him or her very well. In non-verbal language, we also communicate with gesture. In Indonesia, when we are giving out something to others or receiving things from others, it is preferably using our right hand. Why? Almost every kind of activity is using right hand, or at feasible using right hand, such as eating, drinking, giving present, accepting presents, or etc. Because the left hand tend to do all things are unclean. And number 3 is imagine that we are having presentation in a class while the presenter is giving presentation. One of the audience will going inside the room. What will low context culture and high context culture do? So in the low context culture, people will wait until the presenter finish presenting, then he or she will go inside. Because people don't want to get interrupted, and interrupting is considered unpolite. Whereas in the high context culture, people will go inside but bowing the body while walking to show that he is respecting the presenter and get the permission to go inside. Number 4, when you arrive in Indonesia, you may hear how people communicate by sounding their car or scooter's horn. It is communicating through honking. Yeah. So in low context culture, car horn honking is done very rarely, and it is only used when it is important. Where in high context culture, horn honking is some type of communication between riders or drivers to other passengers or other drivers. People use horn at any time, either mad, hurry, reminding others something is coming, or just saying hi to others that they know. When you are passing by, sometimes, hey, hong hong, and yeah, you see your friends is passing by. So here is communicating is very important when we are working in multicultural environment. So we do not want to offend anyone with our conduct, because we just don't know. It's our ignorance. But here, during this visual ethnography, of course, we are going to communicating, we are interacting with each other. So therefore, we need to understand how we communicate between each other. Yeah. In the communication things, we learn there are 2 types of communication culture background, where one is low context culture and the other is high context culture. And then we can see also from the previous slides that based on the culture map, it is mapped where each nationalities is kind of like grouping into the culture way of life. For example, Germany is tend to be a low context culture. Indonesia and Japan is tend to be a high context culture, but also there are some countries they are having in between. Yeah, so those are the things that we can learn from communicating at each other. And just remember, communicating is spending time with each other, and communicating is also exchange of information. So whichever way you look at it, either in the low context culture where you are thinking communicating is a time being, and then in the high context culture, communicating is everything to get to know more others better. So I hope that this will help us during our program, Visual Ethnography Summer Program 2022. To end my slides, I would like to quote a communication is king, understanding is everything by CIKD. So we do hope that we can communicate better with each other, and we value, we understand how low context culture and high context culture is communicating. So the last one, I would like to thank you your time of watching this video, And I would like to say terima kasih, matur suksma. Yeah, in Bali we call it matur suksma. It's mean thank you. So we are looking forward for your participation in summer camp Visual Ethnography 2022. Started in Bali and then we will go to Yogyakarta. Thank you.